With the series tied at 1 game each, the biggest question is who would win the adjustment battle in Game 3. Unfortunately for Miami, it was an eerie similar performance from Game 1 with the Heat unable to score, find a rhythm, or defend at a high level for any sustained amount of time. The result, another blowout loss. What went wrong? We break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, credentialed Heat media member David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Recording this from Kaseya Center on Saturday night after the Heat's loss to the Boston Celtics in Game 3. They go down 104-84. The Heat never led in this one. It felt a lot like Game 1 and a lot less like Game 2 than I think most Heat fans wanted here. Like I said, the Heat never led. They went down big in the first quarter, couldn't make a shot, basically scored 3 points to the first 6 minutes of the first quarter. Wow. And, you know, that slow start is basically what doomed them in Game 1. Yep. It's essentially what doomed them in this one. Yep. They had a hard time making their threes after shooting over 50% from 3 in Game 2. And now they've been outscored in this series by 30 points. And I think there's going to be a lot of Celtics fans pointing to that number and being like, yeah, we might only be up 2-1, but we are dominating the series. And it'd be hard to argue against them considering what Game 1 and Game 3 looked like.
That's fair. I mean, I can understand that perspective. It also kind of feels a little similar to, well, we won more quarters than they do. So, the end result is all that matters. It doesn't, to me anyway. I get the perspective that, you know, when in those wins they've dominated. Well, ultimately, Miami has still been able to get the better of Boston in whatever series they've played. And that's been the case up to this point over the last few seasons. I don't know if they'll be able to duplicate that kind of success this time around. Boston really did seem to answer the call regarding the adjustments necessary. Everything that Miami did so much more effectively in Game 2 was just negated completely. And to your point, it did feel a lot like what happened in Game 1, where they only had 3 points through the first 7 minutes of action. That's unsustainable, right? You know, you cannot hope to win a game when you're down in that kind of large deficit and struggling for offense. And Eric Spoelstra talked about it after the game too. They were trying to compensate. When they couldn't find easy buckets, they couldn't find a way to score. They got a little sloppy, taking chances maybe they wouldn't make, and then they kind of completely fell out of their rhythm. It was just a bad game for Miami, and they didn't respond well. I mean, there were moments there where they might have gone on a little run here and there to try to close the gap, but it was laughably bad. It's like, oh, now you're within 19, you're within 15 maybe, you know, something like that. Can you get it down to 10? No, you allow another 5-0, 6-0, 7-0 run, something like that. So Boston, to their credit, you know, they did what they had to do. They responded. Now it's up to Miami to see if they can respond in Game 4.
I didn't think the Celtics played very well on offense. They missed a bunch of shots.
They did.
Just like Miami did.
They did.
The Celtics went 11 for 37 from three-point range. The Heat, 9 of 28 from three-point range. It just had a hard time.
I don't think they played pretty well on defense either.
I thought the Celtics?
Yeah.
I thought that was my point, was I thought they played excellent defensively. Yeah. They made the adjustment that they had to make, right? Everything they did in Game 2 was wrong. And it reminded me of what
That's fair.
The Heat did in Game 1. It was just the wrong game plan, and that's what we said after Game 1. Hey, this was the wrong game plan. You're not going to be able to drag this series into the mud. You're going to have to score, and you're going to have to shoot threes. You're going to have to do all those things. So the Heat, after Game 1, just threw away the game plan and started a new one. And it worked in Game 2. The Celtics realized in Game 2, the way we're defending this team ain't going to work in this series. So they threw out their game plan on defense and then came in with a brand new game plan defensively. And they switched everything. Yeah. They manned up defensively. They stopped with the soft closeouts. They closed out like real basketball players in an NBA playoff game. And there was a lot more effort. There was a lot more physicality.
Yes.
All those staggered screens, all those Bam Adebayo screens, everything that was working to free up Tyler Hero and Miami shooters in Game 2, the Celtics were so much more physical at the point of attack, and they flattened out Miami's offense. Every time Tyler Hero was trying to get around a screen, it was Drew Holiday or Jason Tatum draped all over him. Right. And
stayed home on Miami's shooters.
They stayed home on the shooters. They defended in their one-on-one situations really well. I thought they played an excellent game defensively, and with Miami being as shorthanded as they are, without Terry Rozier, obviously still no Jimmy Butler, and it's like we saw some Patty Mills minutes in the fourth quarter just because they kind of had to go that direction, but that's obviously not ideal. No DeLon Wright because of personal reasons in this one, but the Heat just did not have an answer on offense. They ended up scoring in the half court 85.5 points per 100 possessions.
That's good, right?
It's awful. And it felt like that in this one.
Yeah, I might have misspoke. Not that Boston didn't play well defensively, but I think it was a combination of both them playing well and Miami kind of shooting themselves in the foot repeatedly, starting off the game poorly and then continuing that process. Like even when they were making these kind of runs or mini runs, however realistic it might have been for them to kind of get within single digits or anything like that, they kept making a turnover or a bad pass. Or
the turnovers killed them. 12 turnovers that led to 24 Boston points. In the Heat, they lose by 20 points in this one. Some of that, garbage time comeback in in the end of the fourth quarter that wasn't, teams emptied their benches. But yeah, they were down by 29, as many as 29 points. And if you clean up some of those turnovers, the game is a lot closer.
Yeah. Miami needs to play a perfect game without Jimmy Butler, without their best player in Jimmy, without one of their best scorers in Terry Rozier.
And the Celtics completely healthy.
Miami needs to play as close to a perfect game as possible, which is what happened in Game 2. They shot 55% from three-point range. That's not sustainable. That's not realistic that they can do that over multiple games. Now, to say that they've done it in the past is one thing. They played good enough defense, and they caught fire from the perimeter. None of those things happened in Game 3. And so they were behind the 8 ball early on and consistently throughout the game. And so things were just getting away from them, and they had no response. They are not the more talented team. Not without Jimmy and Terry Rozier. That's 2 starters you're missing and a key backup in Josh Richardson. Who knows what kind of minutes he would have gone in this series had he been healthy. So, look, that's a whole other conversation. Right now, this is the team you've got. You've got enough, according to Eric Spoelstra. Let's see how they bounce back, if they can, if they respond.
They got to win 3 of the next 4. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. This is what the series was. Many people expected it to look like, right? And it's what it looked like in Game 1, basically. Yep. The Celtics are the more talented team. They're healthier. They've won more games. They're the better team. They're the 1 seed for a reason. You have to respect what it is that the Boston Celtics have put together this year. The Heat, they're the 8th seed for a reason, and they're heavy underdogs because they're without Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier, to your point. So,
they would have been heavy underdogs even with those guys.
No, absolutely. And so I think this is more of what I expected the series to look like. And it did. And it has for 2 of the 3 games. And the Heat are going to have to find an answer that's not shoot 50% from 3-point range. And I'll start with this. You still got to get more threes up. 28 is not enough. And I thought, again, Boston did a great job running them off the line, and that's definitely going to be something that they're going to have to deal with. I also thought they probably passed up half a dozen open shots. Now, is there a real big difference between 28 3-point attempts and 34 3-point attempts?
If you hit those 6, there is.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, and so it looked, again, similar to Game 1 where you've got guys on the perimeter and they were just a little hesitant, and because they weren't letting it fly once it touched their fingertips, that gave Boston enough time to close out. And again, those hard closeouts do sort of beget the attack to close out. You try to get that blow by. And so it's not that the Heat were making the wrong basketball play necessarily. It's just that you have to play a specific way to beat this Celtics team. And they did that in Game 2. They did it in Game 2. They did not play that was not Miami Heat basketball in Game 2. I made that joke about them playing like the 2018 Houston Rockets, but that's how they're going to have to play. And I was surprised that we didn't see a little bit more of that in this game, even though I want to give so much credit to the Celtics defense, which was awesome.
Yeah, I know. I think that's basically what it was. I think Boston took that option out. What we saw last game was Tyler Hero with a ball in his hands for most of the offensive possessions, and he was picking his spots much more carefully. He was driving in, attacking the mid-range. If the shot was there, he'd look to kick it out to somebody on the perimeter, creating offense for himself and others, catch and shoot opportunities that were opened up as a result of that. Those were not existent today. The offense was really, really flattened out, as you pointed out earlier, and I think you do have to give Boston some credit. At the same time, when those opportunities were there, especially earlier in the game, who knows how Boston attacks or defends the game differently had Miami been able to start off hitting some of those shots early on. Both teams missed shots early, but I thought Miami's defense was better early on, and unfortunately their shots just weren't falling. And so Boston just had a kind of free roam to just be able to attack Miami however they choose. And they did a really good job of limiting those open looks, and we may or may not be experiencing some technical difficulties.
I don't know what's going on with this. I want to talk a little bit about Miami's game plan going into this game too, because so after game 2, I do wonder if Eric Spoelstra, obviously anticipating some kind of adjustments coming from Joe Mazzulla.
Yeah.
We saw a different offense from the Heat. You mentioned everything that Tyler Hero was doing in game 2. The Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero pick and roll, that was the crux of Miami's offense the entirety of the win in game 2. And they come out in game 3 in the first quarter, and the very first play, the very first possession, Tyler Hero gets the ball off the jump ball, and then he tosses it to Caleb Martin. And that was obviously something that was instructed for him to do. Hey, Caleb's going to initiate our first set. That obviously whatever set that they drew up to start the game, Caleb was going to initiate it. And I was like, all right, that's kind of interesting because all we saw was Tyler Hero on the ball in game 2. Right. And then the very next play, they do the next Heat possession, they do it again. Instead of Tyler Hero bringing it up, it was Jaime Jaquez on the second possession. Tyler Hero did not initiate the offense in the entire first quarter, basically on a single possession. I can't remember one, and I was tracking it pretty carefully. And I think that was Eric Spoelstra trying to counter the counter that he thought was going to be coming. It's, okay, we got to get Tyler off the ball. Well, what if we already have him off the ball, and now we're running our offense to these other guys, and we've got Tyler Hero basically doing a Duncan Robinson impression, essentially, which is what he was doing in the first quarter, running around, trying to come off those screens and get free. And then obviously sometimes he would come off of a screen, and then that would flow into a pick and roll on the other side. But it was never just this. It wasn't the start of the offense, and it didn't really work. And partly just because I thought the Heat were missing a bunch of shots, but they were contested shots, and they weren't really getting a ton of clean looks. And then in the second quarter, Tyler Hero comes back in, and then he's back on the ball. But by then, I think the game was pretty much already out of hand, and they were just kind of looking for some sort of spark, some sort of rhythm, and they went back to whatever was working in game 2. But at that point, it was a little too late. So what did you think about that adjustment by Spo?
I don't know. I think kind of a mistake. Obviously, not just in hindsight, but sometimes you tend to overthink things. The anticipation of an adjustment and then adjusting to anticipate what you expect could happen, rather than just leaning to what works so well. I feel like if they had gone in there, and again, maybe this is just in hindsight being 2020, if they had been able to duplicate what they did in game 2, and I think, and again, maybe caught Boston off guard a little bit, they might have been able to continue building up that success, but they just never really had that opportunity. One, because they made changes in the way they ran the offense, and because whatever shot opportunities they had early on just weren't following. And I think that's a big difference there, right? I mean, your confidence is shot. You tend to you kind of tend to try to accomplish more when whatever possessions you have become available. And it just didn't work, and Miami just fell into a trap of their own making, unfortunately, because they couldn't hit those shots. Now, Spo talked about after the game, not enough intent, not enough energy, and things of that sort. Do you buy into that? I mean,
no,
I don't.
That was not my takeaway from the game. I think that was Eric Spoelstra not getting a chance to watch the film and just kind of going through his Spoisms,
and not wanting to trash his players either. He's not Doc Rivers.
No, but the one thing he did say, and that was my takeaway, is that the Celtics were way more physical, and that was the case. But that was also Miami's. That was how Miami won game 2. Everybody wants to point to the three-point shooting, and obviously that was a huge part of it.
Right.
But they were also way more physical than the Celtics. And this was sort of what happened in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. The Heat go up 3-0 in the Eastern Conference. They were way more physical. They crushed the Boston Celtics in 3 games, and then the Celtics came back, they responded, and then they won 3 games in a row, and they were the more physical team. And then obviously game 7 happened. And then so this has sort of been the cadence of this rivalry, is the team that just comes out with more physicality and is able to just get to their stuff because they're playing with that physicality, and they're able to set the tone, and they're just able to get to their stuff more, tends to be the team that wins the game. And that to me is even more important than who's shooting better sometimes in this series, because a lot of times that physicality leads to the open threes that turn into those high 3-point percentages and everything like that. So I don't think it was an intentionality thing. I actually loved Miami's energy. I love that you got Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo getting really chippy. Like Bam trash-talking Kristaps Porzingis from the jump. Tyler Hero picking up 2 techs, one because he was getting at the ref, and the other one just because he was chirping at Peyton Pritchard and the other guy, Sam Hauser, and
throwing a ball at his foot.
Threw a ball at his foot, and I loved it. I was here for it, and I know
tackling Jaylen Brown, right?
Just dragged Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown kind of dragged him down with him a little bit, but I loved it. I love that level of chippiness, and I love that the Heat are not backing down from the heavy favorite in this series, right? And I think they need to do that. I think going forward, they got to keep that kind of energy because that's the way you get into Boston's head.
They need that edge. I think Boston was kind of trying to show, you know what, you might have beat us in game 2, but we're not going to get punked. And I think that's why they tried to set that tone a little bit early. And Miami responded with their own level of chippiness, but they just weren't able to duplicate the same kind of level of physicality during their on-court play. And it didn't translate because they just weren't effective offensively anyway.
I thought the Heat have been able to defend Boston pretty well in this series, actually.
104 points,
104 points tonight, 101 in the when the Celtics lost, 101 points they scored, and then 114 points in game 1. Like, those aren't high numbers. Those are not high totals for this Celtics team that had the best offense in the league by a large margin. Yeah. The Heat, by going to their switching, by putting Bam on Jason Tatum, Tyler Hero, I think, has actually done a really good job against Jaylen Brown. For whatever that matchup is. Jovic has been unbelievable in this series defensively. Like, getting switched onto Tatum and not blinking, getting switched onto Jaylen Brown and not backing down. He has been unreal defensively. Yeah. And offensively, like, we know what he provides already. I am so surprised what he's doing defensively.
Yeah, no, I think if there's a bright spot to take away from game 3 and maybe even beyond, however long this season lasts, it's that Nico has shown tremendous improvement as a 20-year-old in his first playoff action. He does not seem fazed by this. His defense on Porzingis has been solid. He's the best option they have. Like, maybe Bam can match physicality, but ultimately he's too undersized, and KP can just get a shot over him or anybody else. And as we saw, and we've seen repeatedly throughout the series, but I think the fact that he's been able to put a hand up, challenge him a little bit more effectively than anybody else has been really, really good to see. And his switching has been great, using his length, using his strength that he's clearly put on over the course of the season. It has really, really helped him and become an asset to Miami.
So the whole strategy, like, I'm waiting for the Tatum game to happen because he's gonna go off in one of these games. It just feels like he has to. But then I also think, like, Bam's on him. It's like Bam's guarding him.
He was great today. Productive anyway. I don't know. Great.
He was all right. I mean, he was not bad. He was 6 for 16, 22 points. Like, he was. He had that triple double in game 1. But, like, his point totals have been lower than what his point totals have been in the regular season. But he also wasn't being guarded by Bam in the regular season every night. So I think that the Heat have basically done what they've wanted to do through 3 games on the defensive end. They can defend the Boston Celtics. They can't score with the Boston Celtics, right? Like, you are keeping them in the low 100s. That's exactly what you got to do. The Heat's problem is getting to 100 points. They had 39 points by halftime in this game. Like, they are just going to have to find a way to score more, and they're not going to be able to just rely on the 3 ball. They got to find other ways to score here.
12 points in the first quarter. I
guess I don't know what the offensive. I don't know what the answer is for them on offense, other than just shooting more and making more of those shots from beyond the arc. Is there another answer?
Creating more opportunities at the rim, but I mean, look, Porzingis is 7'3". Like, he's a huge obstruction there. Miami just can't seem to operate in the painted
Every
area.
time Tyler would drive and Porzingis was there, he would just take a U-turn.
I don't know, man. Like, can you have, like, the offense clear out so that you can have better opportunities and maybe draw defenders that way? I don't know. Do you want to just attack Boston's defense one-on-one like that? They don't have the horses right now, so.
The backdoor cuts have not been there the way I thought they would be. They've done a great job. No, I think there's a lot of off-ball movement. I just think that they're not getting to the spots that they want to get to. Like, maybe. Boston is just, like, the referees are letting this series be physical, and thank goodness. I don't want this to be a heavy whistle series, but the Heat are having a hard time getting to their spots. Especially in this game. And I thought the backdoor cuts would be there, and the Celtics have turned the faucet off on that. So, I don't know. I don't know if the Heat have the firepower with the injuries that they're dealing with to score with the Celtics. Is sort of what I'm getting at. Like this might be it. Like we've seen 3 games in this series. 2 of them have looked like this. One of them hasn't, and the only one that didn't is when the Heat had this like miraculous shooting night. So, and I'm okay with that. Like that's totally fair. Go ahead.
No, in practice yesterday, like Bam saying, we've got other tools at our disposal. We've got other things that new wrinkles that we can add in there. Where the hell were those wrinkles?
Was it Patty Mills?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not trying to be facetious. Like, he's saying, and I don't know if this is just gamemanship. I don't know if this is just like, willing the team to rise to another level. Everybody in game yesterday following game 2, he's, Spo, the genius, Spo getting the most of this team. I'm not taking anything away from what Spo's done. But if Bam is talking publicly in practice about new wrinkles to the offense that take this to another level, well, where the hell were they? Because they certainly weren't there today.
Yeah. It doesn't help that Duncan Robinson just is not healthy. Like that back is so bothersome for him.
If there are other wrinkles, they're probably dependent on personnel, and the personnel just isn't there. No DeLon Wright, really no Duncan Robinson, no Kevin Love in this series.
It's not a Kevin Love series. They can't go zone, and so he can't defend in this series. But that takes away a shooter off the floor, right? And so I don't know what the other wrinkle is. I think that Jaime has had his moments, but you can't run your offense through a rookie and beat the number 1 seed in the East. That doesn't work. Like you could do it in pockets, but that can't be like number 1, number 2, or number 3 thing that you're going to do and actually have a chance in a series against a team like Boston. So I don't know. I don't know what the other thing. We're also not Eric Spoelstra, so maybe there is something up their sleeve. I have no idea. But the one thing I do know is that they got to figure out. I actually didn't mind Tyler Hero playing off ball. I didn't like starting that, but that would be to me have Tyler Hero and Bam still run that pick and roll. That is your best weapon on offense right now. It's your best initiating package. You got to get to that more than you got to it tonight. You got to figure out how to land those screens, more staggered screens, all that kind of stuff. They got back to just like dribbling out and passing for like the first 10 seconds of the shot clock. How many times did it feel like they were like in the last 5 seconds just heaving something up in this game? And they got to figure out ways to get into their offense earlier in the clock so that they could work through it. But then I also like in certain pockets of the game, get Tyler Hero off the ball so he doesn't have to work so hard on the ball. And you got to kind of free him up in a Klay Thompson type role. I think there's ways to do it. I'd like to see like Bam, when he gets into that post, more ball movement when he's in the post, not treating it like an isolation, but treating it as an opportunity to run like those like Golden State Warriors post splits. Like if Bam's got the ball down low and Boston's coming in with all that help, there's going to be opportunities for those kickouts. I'd like to see Bam be a little bit more of a facilitator instead of just trying to bully Kristaps Porzingis.
And it's not working either. The bullying isn't working. The size disparity is just too much.
Bam was 8 of 18 overall tonight, and he missed like probably 3 or 4 shots from like 3 feet away.
The high arcing turnaround jumper just to get over Porzingis. That's not the best shot that you want to take at that point in time.
If the Heat do lose this series, and I'm not trying to jump the gun here. I'm more making an observation. I think if I'm a Celtics fan, I'm still pretty worried because it feels like, and I'm going to go back to my point about the Heat defending Boston. I think Spo laid out the blueprint. There's going to be other teams that are going to be able to score with the Celtics. Healthy teams
in Miami.
Yeah, healthy teams with scoring options. They're going to be able to score with Boston. And I think they have the blueprint. If you put Tyler Hero and Jaylen Brown, because they're not – the thing with the Celtics is they don't run offense through Jaylen Brown. They run offense to Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown oftentimes is that second side, weak side attacker, go isolate with 13 seconds on the clock, let him go to work, make a tough shot, and he's awesome at those things. What he's not awesome at is initiating offense, running pick and roll, going getting other guys involved. And so they're not worried about sticking Tyler Hero on him, knowing that, okay, when Jaylen Brown gets the ball, he's going to just go out Hero, but we're not also going to be worried about Hero getting switched on to anybody else. So you almost just put Hero on an island over here and just be like, you deal with Jaylen Brown, and you figure it out. And he's actually stood up to that challenge pretty well, I think. Brown's definitely gotten him a few times, but overall he's been much better than I think most people would expect. And then you put a real defender, like your best defender on Tatum, and you're really not worried about Derek White or Drew Holiday. Like those guys are good players, but they're not going to beat you in a playoff series, right? Like they might have a good game, but I think the Heat have kind of put the blueprint out, and even if the Heat lose to the Celtics in this series, they might actually be the team that beats the Celtics if the Celtics don't win the finals because they've put the blueprint out. They're just not going to be the one that's executing it when the Celtics ultimately do lose. Again, this is the whole point is if they do lose this series is sort of what I'm getting at here.
No, I know. It also feels like, not quite sour grapes necessarily, or, you can't take solace as a Heat fan necessarily in the fact that Miami has laid out this blueprint, but, the odds were always against Miami. And you know what? I think they're also not scared of this team. I also think they kind of show that the Celtics aren't particularly scary as a team. Despite their regular season success and everything they've been able to accomplish, they can be got.
A couple of listener questions before we wrap it up here. Jonathan writes in, what was the big difference in today's game and game 2? The Celtics defense wasn't all that good. We just agreed on that. Yet the little that they closed out, we couldn't capitalize. P.S. Bam needs a better post game. We kind of already answered the first part of the question, but we could talk about Bam.
Yeah, the post game is not there. Like he has, there were moments there where he could have gone and attacked Porzingis a little bit more effectively. He has no drop step. He's just kind of like leans his shoulder in and hope for the very best. That's not it. You got to have some better footwork. He's just too nimble a player to not have that kind of offensive repertoire. And I know maybe, from our perspective, it's a little different because we don't know exactly how he can counter these kinds of things. And maybe he's trying his very best, but there just doesn't seem to be a lot to his offensive repertoire.
There was times where he would get it in the post and then pull it out and then try to create that runway. But by the time he would pull it out, he would get out to like the 3-point line, create a runway, and then just drive straight at Kristaps Porzingis. The problem with that is when you do that, everybody sees what's about to happen, and then Boston's able to pack the paint with additional defenders, and now that driving lane that you sort of tried to create is no longer there, and there's backside help behind Porzingis, and it just wasn't working. They need to get out into the open court more. There was zero transition play for the Heat in this game. According to Cleaning the Glass, they averaged what is it here? I'm trying to get the frequency numbers. Transition. 4.7% of their possessions were transition possessions. That is in the 0 percentile. That's all, it doesn't get worse than that. And so they need to find a way. And look, part of that is just not creating turnovers. Boston had just 6 turnovers. So they got to create more turnovers that lead to their offense, take points off the board for Boston. That's going to be key for game 4. And then when you do that, you're allowing Bam to get out into transition, and all of a sudden, Porzingis is behind the play, and Bam's getting easy layups and stuff like that. So that's the better part with Bam.
Keep a pause for a second. Sorry.
All right, last question here comes from Steve. What adjustments, if any, can Spo make going into game 4?
Yeah, I think the game plan is still there. I think going away from what worked in game 2 is probably not the best decision. So I would see if he can try and exploit it and create those situations again. Look, ultimately, hitting 55% probably isn't a plan that he can implement, but you want to create those opportunities and have those players have more open looks. And I think they can do that by replicating the offense that we saw in game 2.
I think it starts on defense. It's great that they're able to stand up and defend Boston. They got to create turnovers. They have to create turnovers. It's the only way to take possessions. It's been the recipe
all season long for them.
Exactly. You take possessions away from Boston, and when you get to those turnovers, don't be afraid to pull up from 3-point range. You don't have to go all the way to the basket because you got to inflate those 3-point attempts, because you can't make more threes if you're not taking more threes. You know what I mean? Not to sound too much like Dion Waiters here.
No, only 28.
You got to get up more. You got to get up. You got to get back to 40.
Closer to
You got to get back to 40.
Only 77 field goal attempts, 5 less than Boston, but they took 37 threes as opposed to just 28. 9 more 3-point attempts.
And you can't rely on the Celtics to go 11 for 37 from 3-point range again either. They're gonna shoot better than 30% from 3, probably for every game for the rest of the series. You at least have to assume that if you're the Heat, right? That your game plan can't be hope Boston misses shots, but they are going to have to hope Boston misses some shots, and they're going to have to hope that they make some. But that's, I think, the adjustment. Monday night, Game 4, again, here at Kaseya Center. We'll be here at Kaseya Center to recap that game. In the meantime, thanks for listening to Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your podcast app.